So today we're going to talk about seaming, and we're going to be seaming a cast on edge and a bound off edge together. This also, of course, works for cast on to cast on, bind off to bind off, but basically we're going to be seaming two pieces of knitting together like so, as opposed to their selvage edges together. And basically what we are trying to accomplish is, if you look at your knitting and you see all of these lovely straight columns composed of a bunch of little V shapes, those are your knit stitches. And what we want to do is make it so that these columns of V's and these columns of V's line up really beautifully and look like they were supposed to go together the whole time. And so the way that that's accomplished is, you can usually just break your tail and make it long enough to, just a bit longer than your knitting so that you can just use your tail to do your seaming. And so you'll go into the piece of knitting that your tail is not attached to. And what you're looking for, I know it's really, really tough to see on these videos, but on the edge of your work here is what's called the selvage edge, this kind of the first knit stitch of any piece of knitting, and it's always kind of hideous. Unless you slip it first, it's always kind of lumpy and not very attractive. That can be a little bit difficult to work with. That's like the major problem when you first start seaming, is that selvage edge. What I normally do is just I just skip it. It's right there, I ignore it, and I go into the very next stitch that's right next to it, which is this lovely little row of V's right there. And what you're looking for is that bottommost V right above your cast on or bind off, and it's coming down to a point. It's coming down like this. It's a bunch of V's coming down marching down in a column. You want that bottommost V that's coming down to a point. You want to go under both legs of the V, so my needle's going underneath both legs of this V. And pull your yarn through. And leave yourself a little bit of slack. You don't need to give it a stranglehold or anything. It's just, it's just easier if you can see what you're doing. So leave yourself a little bit of slack. And now you're going to go down into the corresponding V. If I turn this upside down, we're again going to have a bunch of V's coming down to a point. So right side up again, now they're coming up this way. So we're looking for the corresponding V that's coming up to a point here, and it's right there. And so we'll pick up both legs of that V as well. And I've just skipped that selvage edge because it's nasty and ugly. And what happens is, as you pick up these V's, and here you can see the reason I've left this a little slack, I can really easily see which V my yarn's coming out of, and simply go right in and pick up the next one, the one right next to it. If I pull it really tight immediately, it's tough to see exactly where I need to go next. Down here is the same thing. My yarn is coming out of this V here, so the next one over is this guy. If it's worked properly, this method for seaming, which is called mattress stitch, will make your rows of V's line up absolutely beautifully, and you will have basically almost an invisible seam. And what happens once you've got a few stitches done, is if you give it a gentle tug, it kind of zips up and pulls itself closed like a zipper. You don't want to seam too many before you pull it tight, because it can be hard to get to those last ones. I usually seam about 3 or 4 and then give it a tug. And it's a little hard to see, but you can tell this column of V's is coming up, and it just simply keeps going into this orange column of V's. So it looks like it's one continual piece of knitting. It's almost invisible. It's really quite lovely. The problem, of course, comes if you accidentally get off by half a stitch, like if you skip over one leg of the V and accidentally go in and pick up the next one, so you've gotten off by half a stitch, things can start to, the invisibility factor completely goes away because your stitches, your rows are going to be kind of jog over by one half. So you definitely want, you know, it's something you have to keep your eye on. Seaming is not necessarily the best project to do while you're chatting over coffee or watching a favorite movie or something, until you've gotten really used to it. And then on the inside, it's a nice little seam. It's not a particularly bulky join or anything. So I'll do a couple more just to make sure. Now this video is getting kind of long. So the bottom pointing V here, pick that guy up, and the V that's pointing upward down on this one. Bottom pointing V, fighting with your tails, and upward pointing V. And that is mattress stitch seaming.